All right, friend of the show, Kyle Kulinski, found himself a little bit of a brouhaha online. Caused a little bit of an imbroglio.
Really good words.
I'm dropping all the words I love here. My GRE is coming back. So Kyle tweeted, quote, "As a left-winger who will not vote for Biden, I want you to know I'm 100% okay with you blaming me if Trump wins a second term. I mean it. Blame me. Then get to thinking real hard how you're going to get me to support your candidate next time. Maybe even ask me, and I'll tell you." So this is an interesting thing. I mean, Kyle is really drawing a total line in the sand, taking a bit of a different position than some others. And he really he took it online in response to this.
And gave it back, I might say.
And gave it right back. He didn't particularly care. That's what we love about him here on our show. But it's fascinating the level of vitriol that was directed at Kyle. And I think the most pernicious one that was directed at him the most was when Rabia Chaudhry told him, to be a white guy who really won't hurt like some of us will. And again, I just think it's one of those things where that's how they framed it to you in the beginning.
Yeah.
It's white privilege in order to say that you wouldn't. When, as Kyle pointed out, and as I hope he got it from this show, the people who don't vote are disproportionately working class of all colors, of all different ethnic groups.
I've been thinking a lot about this because, the higher you go up on the income scale, the more likely you are to vote. Why?
Yes.
Because if you're like a rich,
works for you,
if you're a rich white person, you're like, yes, I own this system. I get to have the luxury of multiple choices within the system, all of which are good for me and benefit for me. Not to mention just the structural hurdles for people of lower means to be able to get to the polls. Of course, the restrictions that are put in place, but also just like logistical challenges of getting off work in time and being able to make it to the polls. Like, those are real things. But there's a more systemic issue here of, if you're not a privileged person, you look at this system that isn't structured for you, that doesn't benefit you, and you go, why should I bother? Or you actively protest that system by actively withholding your vote. I mean, this is one of the things that I really worry about with the end of the Sanders campaign, frankly, is you had a lot of people, a lot of young people, a lot of working class people who saw Bernie Sanders as a means, as a vessel to have some part of their lives actually reflected in the reality of American government. And it takes an emotional investment. It takes an emotional toll to actually believe, to abandon your cynicism and actually believe that that is possible. This is not a privileged position, but we also know, this is always the tactic. Either, you're white privilege, or you're racist, or you don't care about vulnerable communities. None of it is making an affirmative case. It's all just trying to shame voters into doing the thing that they think is the right thing to do. Kyle's just not going to have it.
It's also ridiculous, these multi-millionaire people who are like, so privileged. It's like, get out of here. You grifters are doing better than anybody else.
A TV show or a Harvard degree
Calling
or whatever.
out somebody very specifically who will probably rage tweeting at us after this segment. But, you look at this, and like you said about power, this is what it all comes down to. Do people genuinely believe that Trump would have just rolled over and endorsed Jeb Bush and went to go and campaign for him? No. He would have burned the house to the ground. He would have been like, I'll run third party and all that. And they would have had to go all out in their ability to try and get him to sign on to whomever the candidate was and to give significant concessions. I mean, on whatever. And Bernie didn't do any of that.
Right.
He never held their feet to the fire. AOC says, I will vote for Joe no matter what he gives. So I'm like, why should they give you people anything?
Right. Well,
Nothing.
and here's where you realize, because Kyle gets smeared as a Bernie sycophant.
Yes.
And obviously,
not.
Obviously, people who say that have never actually watched or listened to his show, because he's been critical of the campaign and mistakes that have been made along the way. But this also just shows you, he's not going to just do what Bernie Sanders tells him to do. He's going to think for themselves, which is something they also can't contemplate. There's another stupid argument that gets made that I think is worth tackling as well, which is this idea that if you don't vote for Biden, it's a vote for Trump. How does that work? That's
I don't know. I don't even necessarily disagree with that, but because there was a lot of this in 2016. I think that is true, but it also comes down to whether it looks at how you look at the Trump presidency, because it's as we were just talking about with, these people who are going after Kyle, is like they believe in these kind of like cultural existentialism and crises, whereas Kyle, I think, looks at it as a lost cause because he truly doesn't believe any economic populism will come of this, or that there will be any sort of victory for working class. So he doesn't look at existentialism in the same way that other people are, and I think that's the difference.
Here are the issues that matter to me. Joe Biden is not going to do anything on any of these issues.
Which deeply matter to him.
Which deeply matter to him. And Joe Biden is not going to do anything serious, like Kyle's laid out. Like, basically, if you put someone in a position of real power within your administration who is a Bernie Sanders person, I'll vote for you. It's not that he's unreasonable or saying absolutely not. I mean, freaking Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar got those sort of goodies from the Biden administration. But of course, they would never do that for the Sanders movement, even though this is a large part of the Democratic Party coalition, large part of the American coalition for that matter, but they would never throw that bone. And that it's not them being unreasonable, it's Kyle being unreasonable in their view for even daring to ask for such a thing. And so he sees it as, look, I can't affirmatively give my vote to Joe Biden. I'm definitely not voting for Donald Trump. So this is where I am. And here's also where a different standard is applied. And this is something that I think is really, really important is, if you vote for Joe Biden, I understand. I'm not going to shame you for that. If you don't vote for Joe Biden, I get that too. I'm not going to shame you for that. And you know what? If you vote for Donald Trump, I'm not going to look at you as like some horrible, evil person. Don't shame voters. Understand their motivations and try to win them over instead of trying to bully and cajole them. And that's something that, that those in the mainstream Democratic and Republican Party establishments and those in the media who want to manufacture consent can never allow that kind of behavior to stand.
That's exactly what it was. And that it's so important to understand, which is you can't shame people for looking at the stakes in their lives and making a rational choice based upon the information that is relevant specifically to them. And that's what they're trying to do with Kyle Kulinski. And I think that this is a really important debate about how power works, about how political systems work, and about how the media and a lot of the people who claim to be all about representing people actually really look down their nose upon anybody who wants to exercise their own free will. And that's something that's really disgusting. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said. And you know what? I'd love to, I think David Pakman was against Kyle on this. Would love to have him on the show. I'd love to talk with him a little bit about this and the way that people are looking at existentialism and this election. But this is a legitimate point of view. And I remember all these never-Trumpers and Evan McMullin and all these guys who got all this airtime and were lauded as these honorable people in 2016. I bet by some of the people that are talking here shaming Kyle. And when he does the same thing, then now he's a crazy person and an enabler of a racist. It just goes to show you that racism canard is the most disgusting and cynical one that they use in politics. And it makes it so that it means nothing. And then in turn, people are just going to brush off real racism when it actually occurs.
Very true. Yeah. Very true. We're with you, Kyle.
Yes, that's right.
All right, we'll have more for you after this.